October 25, 1944, 3:16 hours, Surigao Strait, Philippine Islands. The darkness is absolute. No moon. Cloud cover seals the sky like a tomb lid, and the tropical air hangs thick with moisture and the smell of diesel exhaust. Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf stands on the bridge of the USS West Virginia, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on instruments that glow faintly in the blackness. Around him, his fire control officers murmur coordinates into headsets, their voices calm, almost mechanical. Outside, invisible in the night, 5 other American battleships steam in perfect formation across the northern mouth of the strait, their guns trained southward into an enemy they cannot see with the naked eye. U.S. Navy Action Report. Battle of Surigao Strait, October 1944, 22 miles to the south. Vice Admiral Shōji Nishimura's southern force plows northward through the same narrow waterway. His flagship, the battleship Yamashiro, cuts through the black water at 16 knots, flanked by the older Fusō and a screen of cruisers and destroyers. Nishimura knows American forces are near radio. Intercepts and reconnaissance have confirmed it, but he assumes the engagement will unfold in the traditional manner. Dawn will come. Visual contact will be made. Rangefinders will measure the distance. Gunners will adjust fire based on splashes and spotters' calls. This is how naval battles have been fought since Tsushima, since Chut. This is the doctrine burned into every Japanese officer from his first day at Etajima Naval Academy. Imperial Japanese Navy Operations Log, October 1944. But Nishimura does not know what waits for him in the darkness ahead. At 3:16, the night itself erupts. 6 American battleships, West Virginia, Tennessee, California, Maryland, Mississippi, Pennsylvania open fire simultaneously. 48 14-inch and 16-inch guns thunder in near-perfect unison, their muzzle flashes lighting the clouds like sheet lightning. The sound is apocalyptic, a rolling concussion that vibrates through steel holes and human ribcage. Shells weighing over a ton each arc invisibly through the humid air, crossing 8 nautical miles in less than 30 seconds. U.S. Naval Gunfire Support Operations, 1944. Yamashiro is hit within the first salvo. A 16-inch shell from West Virginia punches through the battleship's superstructure, detonating deep inside. Another strikes the forward turret, shearing off armor plate and igniting secondary explosions. On the bridge, officers stagger, shouting into voice tubes, demanding reports, trying to comprehend what is happening. They cannot see the enemy. Their own rangefinders sweep empty ocean. Their spotters report only blackness. Yet the shells keep coming, massive, invisible. Precise interrogation of survivors. USSB's Report 74, 1946. One Japanese gunnery officer will later describe the sensation as being struck by the hand of God from an infinite distance. Dramatized composite from survivor testimony. Naval War College archives. The Americans are firing blind, yet their accuracy is surgical. It defies logic. It defies experience. By 3:23. 7 minutes into the engagement, Yamashiro is burning from stem to stern. Fusō breaks apart, her keel snapping under the weight of repeated hits, and she splits into 2 flaming sections that drift apart in the current. Cruisers and destroyers scatter, desperate, launching torpedoes at targets they cannot locate, firing guns at muzzle flashes that vanish before return fire can be calculated. The entire Japanese formation disintegrates in less than 20 minutes. Nishimura goes down with his ship. Of his force, only 1 destroyer escapes the Strait. U.S. Pacific Fleet Intelligence Bulletin, November 1944. When dawn finally breaks, American scout planes photograph the wreckage, twisted steel, oil slicks miles long, debris fields thick with the remains of men and machines. The Battle of Surigao Strait is over. It is the last time battleships will engage battleships in history. And it is the first time a fleet has been annihilated by an enemy it never saw. The question that haunts Japanese naval command in the weeks that follow is simple and terrible. How did the Americans fire with such accuracy across 8 miles of open water in total darkness? How did they coordinate 6 battleships into simultaneous salvos without visual communication? How did they track moving targets through the night as if guided by sorcery? The answer lies not in magic, but in a technological revolution so profound that it has rewritten the rules of naval warfare, and the Japanese have no equivalent. Strategic Bombing Survey, Pacific Naval Campaigns, 1946. To understand the slaughter at Surigao Strait, one must step back to the broader context of the Pacific. War. In late 1944, the United States has been fighting Japan for nearly 3 years. The island-hopping campaign has bled both sides. White Terror, Saipan, Pelaluich, a grinding crucible of amphibious assault and entrenched defense. American industrial output has become overwhelming. Factories in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Los Angeles churn out carriers, destroyers, landing craft, aircraft, and ammunition at rates the Empire of Japan cannot match. By October 1944, the U.S. Pacific Fleet outnumbers the Imperial Japanese Navy in nearly every category: carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, and aircraft. U.S. Navy Statistical Summary, 1944. But numbers alone do not explain Surigao Strait. Naval doctrine in 1944 still revolves around the gun duel, the climactic exchange of heavy shells between capital ships, decided by superior optics, crew training, and the raw hitting power of main batteries. The Japanese Yamato-class battleships mount 18-inch guns, the largest ever put to sea. Their doctrine emphasizes night engagements, where superior training and the element of surprise might offset American material advantages. Japanese officers are taught to close the range, use darkness and weather as cover, and strike with torpedoes and concentrated gunfire before the enemy can organize. A response. Imperial Japanese Navy Tactical Manual, 1942. This doctrine worked at Guadalcanal in 1942. It worked at Tassofer. It nearly worked at Columbangara. But in 1944, doctrine has collided with technology and doctrine is losing. The American advantage at Surigao Strait is invisible. It does not roar. It does not shine. It is silent, electromagnetic, precise. Fire control radar. Specifically, the Mark 8 fire control radar mounted on every American battleship in Oldendorf's line. These systems, developed by engineers at Bell Laboratories and the Naval Research Laboratory, can detect surface targets at ranges exceeding 20 miles, calculate their speed and bearing continuously, and feed targeting solutions directly to the main battery directors, all without a single human eye making visual contact. Technical Manual, Mark 8 Fire Control Radar, 1943. When West Virginia opens fire at 3:16, her guns are not aimed by men squinting through optical range. They are aimed by electrons bouncing off Yamashiro's steel hull, returning precise range and bearing data to electromechanical computers that adjust for ship speed, wind, shell trajectory, and the curvature of the Earth. The process takes seconds. The result is devastation. Bureau of Ships Technical Report, Fire Control Systems, 1944. The Japanese have no answer. Their own radar development has lagged years behind. Their optical rangefinders, among the best in the world in 1942, are useless in total darkness. Their night fighting doctrine assumes parity of vision, that both sides will be equally blind until someone stumbles into visual range. But the Americans are not blind. They see everything. And Nishimura's fleet sails into the trap like a man walking confidently into an ambush. He cannot perceive. The implications ripple outward. Surigao Strait is not an anomaly. It is a preview. What other advantages do the Americans possess that remain hidden in the fog of war? The Mark 8 fire control radar mounted aboard USS West Virginia weighs nearly 2 tons. Its antenna array, a skeletal dish of copper and steel, rotates slowly atop the ship's fire control tower, sweeping invisible beams across the ocean surface. The system operates at a frequency of 9,375 MHz, with a pulse repetition rate of 800 Hz. Technical specifications that mean nothing to the average sailor, but everything to the gunnery officers who depend on it. The radar can resolve targets as small as a destroyer at 15 miles, and a battleship at 22 miles, with bearing accuracy within half a degree. Technical Manual TM8, Fire Control Radar Systems, U.S. Navy Bureau of Ordnance, 1943. The Mark 8 is not the product of a single genius, but of a vast collaborative effort. Bell Laboratories, in Murray Hill, New Jersey, supplied the magnetron tubes, the heart of the system's microwave transmission. The Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C., refined the antenna design and signal processing algorithms. General Electric in Schenectady manufactured the electromechanical computers that translate radar returns into firing solutions. Thousands of engineers, machinists, and technicians worked 12-hour shifts throughout 1942 and 1943 to produce these systems in quantities sufficient to equip the Pacific Fleet. By October 1944, every American battleship and heavy cruiser carries at least one Mark 8 system, and most carry to Bureau of Ships Production Report, Radar Systems Division, 1944. The Japanese know radar exists. They have captured examples from downed Allied aircraft and sunken ships, but they have catastrophically underestimated its tactical impact. Japanese naval intelligence reports from mid-1980 useful for detecting air raids but inferior to optical systems for surface gunnery. Imperial Japanese Navy Intelligence Bulletin Number 47, August 1944. This assessment is not stupidity, it is doctrinal blindness. Japanese naval culture venerates the human element. Superior training, night vision, discipline, the spiritual focus of the warrior. Technology is secondary. Tools serve men, not the reverse. But at Surigao Strait, the tools had become dominant. One captured Japanese officer, a surviving gunnery lieutenant from the cruiser Mogami, will describe the battle in his interrogation with haunting clarity. "We were firing at phantoms. Our shells landed nowhere. Theirs landed everywhere. It was as if they possessed the vision of eagles, and we were made blind." Dramatized composite from USSB's interrogation report. No. 118, December 1944. The psychological impact is devastating. Japanese doctrine assumes that courage and training can compensate for material shortcomings, but no amount of courage allows a man to see through darkness, and no training compensates for firing solutions calculated by machines. The Mark 8 system does more than detect targets. It tracks them continuously, updating range and bearing every second. This data feeds into the Mark 38 Director, a massive, turret-mounted control station where fire control officers monitor dials, switches, and mechanical computers that resemble the internals of a grandfather clock scaled up to the size of a refrigerator. The Mark 38 calculates lead angles, shell travel time, target motion, and even the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation. Once locked, the system can maintain firing solutions even as both ships maneuver at high speed. Fire Control Systems Manual. Mark 38 Director, Bureau of Ordnance, 1943. The result is a rate of fire and accuracy unthinkable in previous naval engagements. At Surigao Strait, West Virginia achieves a hit rate of approximately 38% with her main battery, meaning more than 1 in 3 shells fired strikes the target. For context, at the Battle of Jutland in 1916, hit rates averaged less than 3%. At the Battle of the Denmark Strait in 1941, HMS Hood and HMS Prince of Wales achieved hit rates below 5% against Bismarck. Naval Gunnery Analysis. Royal Navy Historical Branch, 1947. The Mark 8 and Mark 38 combination has increased effective accuracy by an order of magnitude. Japanese officers cannot believe the reports. When survivors are debriefed in Manila and Tokyo, their accounts are initially dismissed as panic and exaggeration. They claimed the Americans fired from beyond visual range and struck with every salvo. One Japanese staff officer writes in his diary, "This is clearly the confusion of defeat." Speaking Bundesarchiv, equivalent National Institute for Defense Studies. Tokyo, War Diary Fragment, November 1944. Only when interrogations of multiple survivors corroborate the same impossible details does the truth begin to sink in. The Americans have fundamentally changed the nature of sea combat, and the Imperial Japanese Navy has no counter. The Battle of Surigao Strait is decisive, but it is not isolated. 3 days later, on October 28, 1944, another radar-enabled engagement unfolds in the Philippine Sea, though on a smaller scale. This time, the advantage manifests differently, but with equally lethal results. At 21:45 hours, the American destroyer USS O'Bannon detects a Japanese destroyer squadron attempting to infiltrate Leyte Gulf under cover of darkness. The range is 12 miles. Visibility is less than half a mile due to rain squalls and overcast skies. The Japanese ships are entirely unaware they had been detected. O'Bannon, SSG, surface search, radar, a smaller, lighter system than the Mark 8, but still far superior to anything the Japanese possess, tracks the enemy formation with precision. U.S. Navy After Action Report. USS O'Bannon, DD, November 1944. O'Bannon closes to 8 miles and opens fire with her 5-inch guns, directed by radar. The first salvo straddles the lead Japanese destroyer. The second achieves a direct hit, igniting fuel tanks and ammunition stores. The Japanese, caught completely by surprise, scatter in confusion. They launch torpedoes blindly into the darkness, none of which find targets. O'Bannon maneuvers using radar tracking, avoiding the torpedo spreads by precise course corrections calculated from threat vectors displayed on her radar scope. Within 18 minutes, 2 Japanese destroyers are sinking and a third is dead in the water. Burning Combat Action Report, Destroyer Squadron 21, November 1944. The engagement is small compared to Surigao Strait, but the pattern is the same. American forces see, track, and kill enemies who remain blind. The Japanese launch desperate counterattacks against ghosts. One surviving Japanese sailor, rescued by an American submarine 4 days later, tells his interrogators, "We did not know where they were. We did not know where to aim. Our torpedoes ran into empty ocean. It felt like fighting a demon." Dramatized composite from USSB's interrogation transcript. Japanese naval personnel. 1945. The technical specifications of the SG radar are less impressive than the Mark I. It operates at 3000 MHz, with a range of roughly 15 miles against ships' targets, but it is mass-produced in staggering quantities. By late 1944, nearly every American destroyer, cruiser, and capital ship in the Pacific carries at least one SG radar set. The Radiation Laboratory at MIT, working in collaboration with Raytheon and Western Electric, has refined production techniques to the point where radar sets roll off assembly lines at a rate of over 200 units per month. MIT, Radiation Laboratory Technical Report Series, Volume 27, 1946. The Japanese, by contrast, have equipped fewer than 10% of their surface combatants with even rudimentary spare radar by October 1944, and those systems are primitive, short-ranged, unreliable, and poorly integrated with fire control systems. Japanese radar development. U.S. Naval Technical Mission to Japan Report, 1946. Japanese radar engineers are capable, but they lack the industrial infrastructure, the raw materials, and the institutional support to scale production. Copper is in short supply. Vacuum tubes are rationed. Research funding is diverted to aircraft and kamikaze programs. As a result, the technological gap widens with each passing month. The disparity is not limited to detection. American radar systems are also integrated with communication networks that allow fleet-wide coordination. At Surigao Strait, Oldendorf's 6 battleships fire in coordinated salvos because their radar data is shared across the formation. Via TBS talk between ships' radio systems, fire control officers on each ship receive continuous updates on target position, allowing them to synchronize their fire and avoid wasting shells on the same target. Fleet Communication Systems Manual. U.S. Pacific Fleet, 1944. The Japanese have no equivalent system. Their ships operate independently, even within the same formation. Communication between vessels relies on signal flags during daylight and blinker lights at night, methods that are slow, imprecise, and easily disrupted by weather or combat damage. Japanese doctrine emphasizes individual initiative and decentralized command, which works well in fluid, chaotic engagements but fails catastrophically when facing a technologically integrated enemy that operates as a single, coordinated organism. Imperial Japanese Navy Tactical Doctrine, 1943 revision. By early November 1944, the strategic implications of the radar advantage have become undeniable. Japanese surface forces avoid night engagements entirely. Destroyer squadrons that once hunted American convoys with aggressive night attacks now cower in port or flee at the first radar contact. The Imperial Japanese Navy, once feared for its night fighting prowess, has been psychologically shattered. Interrogations of captured officers reveal a pervasive fatalism. "We cannot win battles we cannot see," one commander admits. The Americans have S. The psychological crater left by Surigao Strait and the subsequent radar-enabled engagements reverberates through the Imperial Japanese Navy for the remainder of the war. In the months following October 1944, Japanese naval doctrine undergoes a desperate transformation, not through deliberate reform, but through the collapse of confidence in traditional methods. Surface engagements become avoided rather than sought. Night operations, once the pride of the combined fleet, are abandoned except in situations of absolute necessity. Japanese commanders, trained for decades to close with the enemy and fight with steel and courage, now issue orders that prioritize evasion and survival over confrontation. Imperial Japanese Navy Operational Orders. November 1944, March 1945. National Institute for Defense Studies, Tokyo. The impact on morale is catastrophic. Japanese sailors, who once believed themselves the finest night fighters in the world, now enter each engagement with the knowledge that they are likely already detected, already tracked, already targeted by an enemy they cannot see. One surviving officer from the cruiser Noki, sunk by American aircraft and surface fire in November 1944, describes the sensation in post-war interrogation. Every shadow became a threat. Every horizon held invisible eyes. We knew they were watching us long before we could see them. The sea itself had turned against us. Dramatized composite from USSB's Interrogation Report, No. 203, May 1946. This demoralization extends beyond individual psychology into operational planning. By December 1944, Japanese surface forces are relegated primarily to transport and evacuation. Missions shuttling troops and supplies between bypassed garrisons in the Philippines, the East Indies, and the Central Pacific. Even these missions are conducted with extreme caution, hugging coastlines, exploiting bad weather, and moving only during periods of heavy cloud cover that might degrade American radar effectiveness. The aggressive, offensive spirit that characterized Japanese naval operations in 1941 and 1942 has been extinguished, replaced by a grim calculus of survival. Japanese naval operations in the Philippines campaign. U.S. Naval War College Analysis, 1947. The American advantage, meanwhile, continues to expand. Radar technology does not stand still. By early 1945, the U.S. Navy begins deploying the Mark 13 fire control radar, an improved system with better target resolution and resistance to jamming. The Mark 13 can track multiple targets simultaneously and distinguish between closely spaced ships, a capability that proves decisive in the confined waters around Okinawa, where Japanese kamikaze escorts and picket destroyers attempt to operate in tight formations to confuse American gunners. The Mark 13 cuts through the confusion effortlessly. Technical manual. Mark 13 Fire Control Radar System, Bureau of Ships, 1945. Beyond the tactical level, the radar advantage reshapes strategic logistics. American naval planners, confident in their ability to dominate surface engagements at night, schedule convoy movements and amphibious operations without fear of Japanese interdiction. Supplies flow uninterrupted to forward bases. Fuel, ammunition, food, and replacement personnel arrive on time, enabling sustained offensive operations. The Japanese, by contrast, watch their logistics network collapse. Convoys are intercepted and destroyed by American submarines and surface groups, guided by radar. Isolated garrisons starve. Fuel shortages, ground aircraft, and immobilized ships. The industrial backbone of the empire begins to fracture. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey. The War Against Japanese Transportation, 1947. The human cost of maintaining this technological edge is often overlooked in technical narratives, but it is substantial. Radar systems require constant maintenance. The humid, salt-laden air of the Pacific degrades electronic components rapidly. Magnetron tubes burn out. Waveguides corrode. Antenna motors seize. American radar technicians work in shifts around the clock, soldering connections, replacing parts, calibrating systems, and troubleshooting failures under combat conditions. These men, many of them teenagers, fresh from technical schools in the States, receive little recognition in official histories. But without them, the radar advantage collapses. Bureau of Ships Maintenance reports. Pacific Fleet Radar Systems, 1944 to 1945. One such technician, Radioman Second Class Robert Henning, serves aboard USS Louisville during the Philippines campaign. His service record, preserved in National Archives files, documents over 300 hours of emergency radar repairs conducted during general quarters, meaning he worked on live, high-voltage systems while the ship was under fire. Henning's diary, donated to the Naval War College Library in 1983, includes an entry from November 12, 1944. Fixed the Mark 8 again tonight. Took shrapnel through the waveguide during the air raid. Patched it with a tin can and solder. Fire control says it's tracking better than before. Chief says, I'm crazy. Maybe I am. Personal papers, Robert Henning collection, Naval War College Library. Henning survives the war. Thousands of others do not, but their collective labor sustains the invisible edge that allows American battleships to strike from darkness, destroyers to hunt blind enemies, and cruisers to coordinate fire across entire task forces. The technological advantage is not a product of genius alone, but of relentless, unglamorous maintenance, conducted by exhausted men in steel compartments lit by red lamps. The legacy of Surigao Strait and the radar revolution extends far beyond 1945. In the immediate post-war period, the U.S. Navy conducts extensive analysis of Pacific engagements to extract lessons for future conflicts. The conclusion is unambiguous. Sensor superiority is more decisive than firepower superiority. A fleet that sees first wins, even if outgunned. U.S. Naval War College study. Lessons of the Pacific War. 1947. This insight shapes American naval doctrine for the next 50 years. During the Cold War, the U.S. Navy invests billions in radar, sonar, and electronic warfare systems, building fleets designed around the principle of information dominance. The Aegis combat system, deployed in the 1980s, is a direct descendant of the Mark 8 and Mark 13 radars, a networked, computer-integrated system that tracks hundreds of targets simultaneously and coordinates fleet-wide responses. The lesson of Surigao Strait: that technology and integration, defeat courage and firepower, becomes foundational to American military thinking. Aegis weapon system development history. Naval Sea Systems Command, 1995. The Japanese, conversely, learn a different lesson. Post-war Japan, constitutionally restricted from maintaining offensive military forces, rebuilds its maritime self-defense force with an emphasis on defensive technologies and coalition integration. Japanese naval officers study Surigao Strait as a case study in the dangers of technological complacency and doctrinal rigidity. The engagement becomes a cautionary tale taught at the National Defense Academy, illustrating how cultural assumptions and institutional inertia can blind a military to the realities of modern warfare. Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force educational materials. Battle of Surigao Strait analysis. 1965. The radar advantage also influences Cold War dynamics beyond the naval sphere. Soviet military planners, aware of American sensor superiority demonstrated in the Pacific, invest heavily in electronic warfare and jamming technologies designed to degrade Western radar systems. The result is an electronic arms race that parallels the nuclear standoff, an invisible competition fought in frequencies and algorithms, rather than missiles and tanks. By the 1970s, every major military power possesses sophisticated radar and counter-radar capabilities. But the Americans retain a qualitative edge rooted in the industrial and institutional advantages established during World War II. CIA intelligence assessment. Soviet electronic warfare capabilities, 1978, declassified 2003. The legacy extends into the modern era. The Gulf War of 1991 showcases American information dominance on an unprecedented scale. Coalition forces, equipped with AWACS radar planes, satellite reconnaissance, and networked command systems, achieve what military historians describe as a Surigao Strait in the desert: the systematic destruction of an enemy force that is detected, tracked, and engaged before it can effectively respond. Iraqi commanders, like their Japanese predecessors 50 years earlier, describe the sensation of fighting an invisible enemy that strikes with impossible precision. U.S. Department of Defense. Conduct of the Persian Gulf War. Final report to Congress. 1992. In the 21st century, the principle of sensor superiority has evolved into the concept of network-centric warfare. Military operations built around shared information, distributed sensors, and coordinated responses across air, sea, land, and cyber domains. Modern American destroyers carried descendants of the Mark 8 radar, SPY-1 and SPY-6, systems that track ballistic missiles and aircraft at ranges exceeding 200 miles. Drones and satellites extend the electromagnetic eyes of commanders across entire continents. The night vision that gave American battleships dominance in 1944 has become all-spectrum. All-domain awareness. U.S. Navy doctrine publication. Information dominance in the 21st century. 2015. Yet the human element remains constant. Just as radioman Henning kept USS Louisville's radar operational under fire, modern technicians maintain Aegis systems, repair satellite links, and troubleshoot network vulnerabilities. The tools have grown exponentially more sophisticated, but the principle endures. Technological advantage requires not just invention, but sustained effort.